everyone. Welcome back. I'm Alfred Lambremont Webre, and today, once again, joining us from just right next to the Pine Ridge, the Pine Ridge Reservation, is Mia Feroleto. Welcome, Mia.
Hello, Alfred. Thank you for having me back.
Well, you know, we've all been waiting to hear what the Consciousness and Contact conference was. I've seen some of the photos, and I've heard just a bit of the reports, and I've from what I've heard, it was an amazing multi-dimensional event. So could you walk us through it, please? Take us through it from beginning to end with all the twists and turns.
I'd be delighted to share the conference with you and your listeners. People arrived on Thursday afternoon, July 18th, around 3 o'clock. And the All Nations Gathering Center is owned by Dallas and Becky Chief Eagle. Dallas is a sacred hoop dancer who travels all over the world performing. And Becky is with the housing department on Pine Ridge Reservation. But she's been on the spiritual path for many, many years and healed herself of cancer twice through performing ceremony on a daily basis. And they're just an extraordinary couple, and their property has beautiful high energy with animals. They have horses and dogs, and there's a beautiful stream in the back of the property next to the sweat lodge. They had 3 teepees set up in case people wanted to sleep in the teepees, and a large sleeping tent, and also a party tent, an open party tent, and a bunkhouse, air-conditioned bunkhouse that sleeps 20, as well as a small cabin, also air-conditioned, up by the main building. And the downstairs was the dining room and commercial kitchen, and the upstairs was the conference room where we all sat for presentations. And it was a very interesting kind of culture shock as people arrived one right after the other on Thursday afternoon, because many people had never been to a Native American reservation before. And as one of the Lakota said, people were coming to the Pine Ridge version of Beverly Hills, coming to the All Nations Gathering Center. You know, it's a beautiful place, but it's not like one would typically expect to go to a conference, being in a, you know, big hotel and that kind of thing. So we had rustic accommodations, and as anyone who has read Carlos Castaneda knows, one of Don Juan's big lessons was to change the patterns in our daily lives, to shift our awareness and change our attitudes and open up new dimensions of thought. So this was all consistent. I must say, though, that one couple who had driven, leaving that morning at 5 a.m. all the way, and coming all the way from Oklahoma, went and looked at the sleeping accommodations and left without saying a word. They just took off. And it was interesting for me, because as I sat down to try to coordinate sleeping arrangements for people, I realized that the only way to resolve this issue of where individuals would sleep was if they decided for themselves. So Dallas Chief Eagle and Emmett, another Lakota member, gave the grand tour around the property, and everyone made their own decisions in terms of where they would be comfortable sleeping, which was, you know, very important. We had dinner, and that night Dallas performed a sacred hoop dance for us and told us the Grandfather Rock story, which has to do with awareness and focusing awareness on Grandfather Rock so we can eliminate all the unnecessary distractions in our lives. Again, you know, relating in many ways to Castaneda's work. And while this was going on, there were red and blue lights over the ridge down by the creek. You know, we could see them, and other people had started to see lights of various kind. And from the beginning, I had asked the ETs that I'm in contact with to come to the conference, and in fact, they came on a daily basis. It was quite extraordinary. And the elemental kingdom also came out. You could just feel the energy rising from the very first night. And I must say, there was a lot of kind of disparate, chaotic energy as everyone came together, you know, people meeting each other for the first time from all across the country and overseas as well. And I've only organized one other conference like this, and that was last year in Vermont with Linda Moulton Howe as our main speaker. And the group harmonized pretty quickly in Vermont, virtually overnight. It was a slightly smaller group with less speakers. And it took us a little bit more time on Pine Ridge, but of course, you know, we were also dealing with the intensity of the reservation, the energy in the Badlands, all the history, you know, everything that's alive, very much alive on the reservation in Pine Ridge. So we had this amazing performance with Dallas doing his hoop dance. And for those of you who know about the hoop dance, the rings go into many different shapes and forms while the dancer is performing, and he becomes a bird. He extends his hoops out on both, you know, through both arms, and creates tail feathers and builds connected rings that form shapes that interlock with each other to show the interconnection of all life. And it was very profound sitting there watching him do this in their sacred space. That's where they have their shrine set up. And to have people who are actively working in shamanic ways or spiritual ways pick up on the energies as they were rising through the evening was really wonderful. And again, having the confirmation of seeing lights in the sky was very powerful for all of us. We knew something special was going to happen that weekend. The next day we had several speakers. Alan Steinfeld showed the interview that he had done with Chief Arvil Looking Horse in New York City when he and his wife Paula were there the month before. And Cindy Catches, who was married to medicine man, Lakota medicine man Peter Catches, and was the daughter-in-law of Pete Catches, another very well-respected and well-known medicine man, spoke about Lakota spirituality and culture. And Cindy is a member of the Baha'i faith, so she melded that spiritual practice in with Lakota and pointed out the similarities and the differences. And she also prepared us for attending a Sundance ceremony and, you know, told us some of the protocols surrounding that, and that a woman cannot be in her moon cycle during a Sundance ceremony, that it impacts the dancers, the sun dancers, in a negative way, and can be very, very harmful if not respected. It was important, I think, for people to hear Cindy the first full day, because they had, you know, gotten to know Becky and Dallas a little bit. But Cindy really grounded the information and the energy, being a white woman who's lived for more than 30 years on the reservation. And her husband, Peter, died a year ago, so the Sundance that was held on her property, which just ended on Sunday, was one of the oldest Sundances that takes place on Pine Ridge for more than 40 years. And it was also the honoring of Peter's passing last year. And her daughter, Faith Holmes, who is a professional chef in Washington, D.C., is also a member of the Baha'i Faith. And I was so fortunate to have Faith fly in from D.C. to be our chef throughout the conference. We had this extraordinary selection of vegetarian meals that Faith prepared morning, noon, and night. And then we had a traditional Lakota feast on Sunday afternoon. So everyone was extremely well fed, and once they settled down to dormitory style living, everything shifted within about 24 hours. It was quite remarkable. It is remarkable how flexible human nature actually is, given the opportunity to get out of, you know, the daily patterns that we engulf ourselves in. So Thursday was Cindy Catches, Kevin Briggs, whom you've interviewed on your show. Oh, sorry, this is Friday. Kevin Briggs, whom you've interviewed on your show, gave us the story of his contact and the beings who have communicated with him since he was a small child. And he shared how he has integrated living with beings popping in and out of his life. As you probably know, he and his wife Sandy live in Florida, and they have regular visitations. There's a wonderful photograph that Sandy took outside their back door of a rainbow with a spaceship in the picture that has been reproduced in New Observations magazine. And Kevin also spoke a bit on Sunday about the possibilities of a full-blown reveal, perhaps coming up next year in 2020 in February as a possible date. So a lot was discussed around that, and he's always such a pleasure to listen to. He has a wonderful sense of humor, and talked about being accompanied down to the pub with his ET friends and so forth. We had a vast array of speakers, as you know, Alfred. We had 10 speakers, and some of them have had what could be considered scary interactions, abduction scenarios, whereas others' contact has been much more playful and lighthearted, as has been my experience over the years. So after Kevin, Ananda Bosman gave his presentation and talked about a whole variety of things. He covered 432 hertz frequency and the work that he's done with that, which I know he covered in an interview with you as well, and his early contact as a child and also as a young man, having disappeared for periods of time as a child and gone aboard a spaceship, and in general, I think people responded very well to Ananda's work. It was great to have him there, and certainly to have this group of individuals come together was a plus, a big plus in terms of visitation and increasing the odds of visitation happening. But I had been told in advance that that the ETs would be showing up, so I had no doubts that they would be there. That evening, Brother Larry Swallow came and told the Lakota creation story, and he also led a sweat lodge ceremony down by the creek in the sweat lodge that Becky and Dallas have on their property, and that was a profound experience for many of the people there. Again, there were ships overhead the sweat lodge. The elementals came out, and people described having someone jumping on the roof of the sweat lodge while they were in it. And in general, the feeling of elevated energy on the property was extreme. Speaking for myself, my Kundalini energy was just moving the entire time that we were there. Lots of very high vibration, and having a sense that my entire body was very much electrical. Having had visitations for decades, there were times when they would come to my house, and it was almost as if I was plugged into the circuit. My body was just completely vibrating at such a high level. This was not quite like that, but my whole being was very much charged, and my batteries were being charged over the time of the conference. So that was a very important time. And I have to interject here too, as extraordinary as all of our speakers were, I think most everyone there would agree that the Lakota piece ultimately was the most powerful for everyone. It was just such a profound experience to be accepted into basically the home of Becky and Dallas Chief Eagle, and to have access to all of these things which are normally not accessible to people other than the Lakota tribe. On Saturday morning, Ivan Lookinghorse, the brother of Chief Arvil, who is also a spiritual leader within the Lakota community, came over at about 9 o'clock and talked about the Sundance, the importance of the Sundance ceremony, and the fact that from the time of colonization up through the 1970s, when the American Indian movement was formed and the second siege at Wounded Knee took place, when the members of AIM stood up and demanded their right to Sundance and honor their spiritual rights and beliefs, it was illegal to be participating in Sundances. So Ivan explained the history and the fact that it is a sacred ceremony. His partner, Uma, stood up and said, I don't know, this is not for tourists. I don't know how this was arranged, but this is not done. Groups like this are not able to come to Sundance. And he discussed the sacredness of the ceremony and the importance for women of honoring their monthly cycle, being respectful and completely covered in terms of arms, legs, wearing a long skirt. The sun dancers fast and do not have water for 4 days. So no water bottles, no food, no cell phones, no cameras. It's a very insular, sacred act that we were invited into. And it was a very interesting story because I had gone to the Sundance last year with Ivan, and I was trying to remember the name of the Sundance that I had attended. And on this one particular day a few weeks ago, Cindy Ketches called me and said, I think it's this one particular Sundance. And I had been trying to reach Ivan, but because I have an 802 number, he thought I was a robocall. So he wasn't answering the phone, for multiple calls. So I called him again, and he picked up the phone, and he was surprised to hear it was me and explained why he had not been answering. And I asked him about the Sundance that we had gone to last year on the same weekend, coincidentally. And he said, oh, that's Dickie's Sundance. Let me call Dickie. And a few minutes later, the phone rang, and it was Ivan again. And he said, normally it takes a day or two to connect to Dickie. And he answered on the first ring, and he said, of course, everyone is invited to come. So both Ivan and Cindy felt that Spirit was leading us to this Sundance because all the doors were opening one after the other in terms of synchronicities and coincidences. So in terms of the Sundance, the Lakota do not feel that it's appropriate to discuss the ceremony. They do not publicize, and I would like to respect and honor that here. But I will say that over the Sundance for an hour and 20 minutes was a stationary craft. And the Lakota all saw it, the people at our conference saw it, and members of the tribe came over to members of our group and thanked us for coming, but also thanked us for bringing the craft. So it was really an extraordinary experience bringing these two worlds together, even though the Lakota have such a system of star knowledge and a belief that they come from the stars. And this, in fact, was a confirmation for them and for us in a very beautiful and moving way. I'm so grateful that this happened in broad daylight. Then that afternoon, Suzanne Bishop, who is an art therapist, discussed hybrids and hybrid children and showed examples of art that have been made by hybrid children and people in therapy, coming to terms with their heritage, which is really something that I believe we all have to come to terms with. And Terry Lovelace, the former Assistant Attorney General of the state of Vermont, who wrote a book last year about his abduction experience at Devil's Den when he was in the in the military. It's called Incident at Devil's Den, A True Story by Terry Lovelace, compelling proof of alien visitation, alleged government involvement, and an alien implant discovered on a routine X-ray. This book is available through Amazon. Terry talked about, you know, all that had happened to him. And the interesting thing I felt listening to Terry speak was how, even though this happened when he was in his early 20s, and he's probably a 65-year-old man today, he's still quite fearful from the experience. And I asked him why he had not inquired of his abductors, even now telepathically, why he had not asked why he was taken. And he's still not ready to communicate with them, which I found really interesting. So after Terry's talk, we all got into our vehicles and drove to the Badlands, and that was quite an extraordinary experience. I was in the car with Kevin Briggs and Whitley Strieber, Alan Steinfeld, Faith Holmes, our chef, and my friend Annie Wagner, who was married to an Ojibwe medicine man for many years. And the minute we pulled out of the property with all the other cars behind us, the entire SUV was surrounded by hundreds of orbs. They were the most beautiful thing. They were pink and golden, mostly pink, so they were all heart chakra orbs. And at first they were outside the vehicle, and then dozens of them were inside the vehicle. They were just everywhere, and Faith was the only other person who could see them. But they stayed with us for 25 miles all the way to the edge of the Badlands. It was such an extraordinary expression of universal love, at least that's how I read it, and support. The fact that we were coming together in a compelling way, in a heartfelt way, and they were just bouncing all over the place, but completely surrounding the vehicle. So we got to the Badlands at dusk, and a number of the attendees had never been there before. So the power of standing with these incredible earth structures, I find overwhelming. I drive back and forth through the Badlands National Park every time I go to the reservation, and it's always, you know, the highlight of my week when I'm doing it. And people tried to make contact at that time, but there were so many insects out that we hightailed it ultimately back to the All Nations Gathering Center. But a number of us, myself included, saw flashes of silver in the sky, and I extended my hands, as I generally do, and cupped my palms back and forth to call anybody who's in the area, and had the experience that it was almost like rubber bands were in the palms of my hand and being snapped upwards energetically. So I knew that I was connecting in some way, and that night there were ships over the property again, and people saw them. And you know, I just want to make a comment here, connecting to the book "The Master and Margarita" by Bulgakov, that was written during Stalin's regime, and censored for many years. It was finally published as a book in 1967. But the opening of that book talks about how one small act influences so many other things. The beginning of the book, two men are sitting on a park bench, and one says to the other, "Is such and such going to happen?" And the other one says, "Did the jug of oil spill?" Because, of course, if the jug of oil spills, the unfolding of events will happen in a totally different way. And that was true for us, too, in that some people stayed longer at the Sundance, and it kind of impacted our whole schedule for the rest of the conference. For the next 2 days, we got to the Badlands at dusk, so people didn't really get to see everything. It impacted the size of the audience for our speakers. It impacted Yvonne Smith's presentation on Sunday because we had to make room for another presenter who could have spoken on Saturday. So it was just really interesting to me to see the issues that can arise even in a gathering of people who are on the spiritual path, but doing their own thing. I found it really kind of fascinating. On Sunday morning, we had what I consider to be the most profound event of the entire conference. Vonda Highhawk, who is a direct descendant of Chief Spotted Elk, otherwise known as Bigfoot, a disrespectful name given to him by the U.S. Cavalry, came at 9 in the morning to speak to us about Wounded Knee. And a young Lakota girl had been sexually abused, and a ceremony was being done in the sweat lodge for purification and to release the negative energy surrounding the incident. And Vonda spoke to us about all of the trauma and suffering from Wounded Knee. She's a very powerful activist and just an amazing woman. And it was the most moving and extraordinary presentation of the entire weekend, in my opinion. And I reminded everyone that when you are committed to walking the spiritual path, it doesn't matter what race or color or creed you are, but that all of the people throughout history who have walked this path in the past, in the present, and future spiritual path followers, we are all walking together. We are all working on these things together. And there was such a moment of healing that morning between the Lakota tribe and the white race, the white settlers historically, that Vonda even surprised everyone and showed up at Wounded Knee to continue sharing information and insights actually at the memorial. So that to me was the pivotal moment. And I had been told last summer in August that a portal was going to open energetically to help heal what transpired at Wounded Knee. And I do believe that a little piece of that actually began. There were a couple of other personal things that happened that I'd like to share. For many years, I lived with a pack of 6 rescue dogs, 2 horses, and 3 cats. And several years ago, my horse Bailey, a thoroughbred, a chestnut thoroughbred with a white blaze, came to my animal communicator friend David Lewis and told him that he was coming back, that he was not going to let me be here in these chaotic times without him being on the planet too. And on Sunday morning, unbeknownst to anyone, one of the mares had a baby boy, and he is chestnut with a white blaze. By the time any of us saw him, he was completely cleaned up, this perfect little colt, and following his mother around. And David Lewis had told me that Bailey would just show up in the neighborhood, probably to someone that I knew, and that I would recognize him immediately. And I swear, I do think that Bailey's back on the planet. And the other thing that I wanted to share is the fact that out of the blue, a few weeks before the conference, I was contacted by the representative of 2 tribes from British Columbia who are having visitations, and they've asked me to come up there and speak to the tribes. So I heard from them the last day of the conference again, and I'm just putting together an outline of what we'll cover, and they're approving the funding to have that happen. So I thought that was a wonderful opportunity and opening to share the events of Pine Ridge in British Columbia.
Wow. Well, this is quite a breadth. There's kind of an overarching theme that comes out, and it's this. What dates again were the conference?
The conference began on July 18th, just 2 days after the eclipse and full moon, and ended on the 22nd. And
Okay.
Interestingly enough, my birthday is 2/2, February 2nd. So.
Right. The reason why I asked that is that we in fact had been following and broadcast over the last couple of weeks a 50-year prophecy that was done by the Brazilian prophet Xico Xavier. Xico Xavier, during his lifetime, his prophecy sold more than 40 million books, and he donated all of the revenues, all of the profits of those books to charity, because he said that he really didn't write those books. But he in 1969, he did a 50-year prophecy. Excuse me, he did a prophecy in 1986, and the prophecy said that in 1969, sort of the Lord, the kind of the source, had come down and had said that an additional 50 years was given to humankind, and that if World War III had not broken out by July 19th and 20th, if it had not broken out by those dates, and this was going back to 1969, there was a 50-year period, that humankind would be allowed to join the peaceful galactic world, and that there would be sightings that would accompany this. And so everybody throughout, mainly everybody who has been following this, and there have been 40 million books of these sold, but it has been very much in the, you know, in the South American world, in the Latin world, in the Brazilian world, Portuguese, around the world, that everybody was looking for the sightings that were going to take place on the weekend of July 18th, 19th, and 20th, 2019.
Wow.
That was the culmination of the 50-year period that Source had given to humanity, that if World War III had not broken out by that date, then humanity would live in peace and would join, Earth would join the civilization of galactic worlds, and there would be sightings. And people have been saying, where are the sightings? Well, I'm going to posit right now that those sightings occurred on the Pine Ridge reservations, and I'm just putting that out.
They did.
What do you think?
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
What do you think?
You're absolutely right, Alfred. Alfred, you know, I have tears in my eyes. I drove home through the Badlands on Tuesday after the conference because I was too tired to go home Monday. You know, this is so emotional for me. What's so interesting is I actually physically had this very weird response at the conference. My whole body started retaining water and blew up, like my legs, my feet, my whole body, my hips, everything was completely swollen. And I was having this, I've done healing work previously a number of times where, you know, I take on people's illnesses, and something was happening. It was like I was alchemically clearing something, but not for myself. You know, I was clearing something for the group. And at times, it was even difficult for me to walk, to tell you the truth. But, oh God, this is so emotional, because last August, as I shared with you before, when I had this quantum experience surrounding the Lakotas and Pine Ridge, the energy that came through me was pure divine love. You know, tears rolled down my face. Again, for an hour and 20 minutes, I timed it, and that's how long the craft was over the Sundance ceremony at the conference. And when I looked at myself in the mirror, I was transfixed. I looked like I was a 15-year-old girl again, and I'm 63. But when I drove home through the Badlands, I just thanked God for giving me the opportunity to put this thing together, because I knew how significant it was on every level. And this is the thing, it's not just about the ETs. All of the kingdoms were present there. The elementals, you know, the Devic realm, the angelics. I mean, those orbs were just pure angelic energy. Everything was there. And everyone, as in Vermont last year, came together as a family. Everyone left loving each other, you know, truly having love in their heart for each other. And the Lakota had love in their heart for us. We really, you know, began the process of healing something that needed to be healed, but also there was just such a profound sense of love that was communicated and shared with everyone there, everyone. And, you know, I learned so much. This is the last conference, per se, that I'm planning to organize, because there's just so much minutia, and I'm happy to go to a conference like this. I don't quite see myself attending these big, hotel events with thousands of people, but I was so profoundly moved, to even bring commerce to Pine Ridge when people are living on $3,500 a year there. I was giving someone $100 for helping in the kitchen, and she cried. James and Carlos live with Dallas and Becky Chief Eagle, and they drove everybody around, and they were just so good. And I had planned on giving them each $250 to say thank you. And Carlos looked at me and said, James did more work than I did. He deserves to get paid more than I do. So Carlos got $200 and James got $300. How many times would a white person say that to you? Do you know what I mean? I hate to sound racist myself, but we're so geared. The money game is just so entrenched in our culture. And the Lakota know that, the Great Father takes care of all of us. So it was just an extraordinary experience. And I do believe that we crossed a threshold. I definitely do.
Wow. Well, when in the article that will accompany this interview, we will put the links to the story of Xico Xavier and the prophecy. And could you, if it is at all possible, when you do, if it is that you're going to at some point be back at the Pine Ridge Reservation, relate that story and that 50-year prophecy to Dallas and Becky Chief Eagle and to all of the people at the reservation that were in that Sundance and that saw that event and that saw the craft stationed above there, and then say that that's an event that was prophesized for 50 years, and that not only that was a dispensation given by source, and that it means that there is to be no global war, and that the earth is to be joining the community of nations, of galactic and universal nations. And that's the prophecy of Xico Xavier of Brazil. I'll put the link so you can see that and you can show it to them.
At the All Nations Gathering Center, which is where we were.
Yeah. Yeah. So that prophecy was fulfilled at the All Nations Gathering Center.
Yep.
Isn't that is awesome? That is totally awesome. I'm just sitting here and this is totally awesome. This is totally awesome because people around the world have been searching for the sign of where was this prophecy, and this can be one of the signs that this prophecy was fulfilled, because it was supposed to be July 19th and 20th, 2019, and that's the date of the conference at All Nations.
That's the date of the Sundance. The Sundance was the 20th.
Yep, that's it. And that's the exact date, and that was given 50 years ago in 1969.
Wow, and that was, the orbs were surrounding us, and I have to share some anagrams with you because they fit into this discussion in a way energetically. My name Mia. The anagram for Mia is I am. My middle name, and as Ivan Looking Horse pointed out to me, MIA, AIM backwards, American Indian Movement. Ivan was joking with me.
Wow, isn't that amazing?
But my middle name is Allison, I all son. My last name is Feroleto, free tool. And I've always felt that my mission is to help people connect to their own spirituality. My father's name was George Joseph. My mother's name was Mary and Claire. So I have Joseph and Mary. And I could go on and on in this, with this. The anagram for the word Messiah is she's Mia.
Wow.
I'm definitely working with the cosmic Christ energy is the point I'm trying to make. It's, you know, it just repeats and repeats in my life again and again.
Wow.
And the white buffalo calf that was born in 2012 was born at the Fay Farm in Connecticut. My mother's maiden name was Fay, and she was born in Connecticut. I grew up in Connecticut. I was the only one of 5 children born in Vermont while my father was in medical school. But there are all these interesting coincidences that, you know, when you look at in total, my birthday is Groundhog's Day, February 2nd, Imbolc. It's the balance between the dark and the light. So I really feel I'm doing the work that I'm meant to be doing on the planet. And I've had a dream about creating an artist in residency program for more than 20 years. I created Art Walk New York, which raises $1 million annually for Coalition for the Homeless. And my landlord's here in Wasta. I live in this adorable little town of 80 people at the moment. My landlords came to the last day of the conference, and we haven't talked about Whitley or Yvonne Smith or their presentations or a few others, but they came and they stayed until about 9 o'clock at night and really enjoyed hearing Whitley speak. And I sit at this window looking at the motels across the way. I'm living in the Thunderheart Motel, which was used in the making of the film. It's where the FBI agents stayed, supposedly in the movie. And I'm renting an adorable efficiency apartment here, which I love. But sitting at this window working on the conference, I just kept looking at these other 2 motels across the road, and my landlords own half the buildings in town. And I just thought, what a wonderful artist in residency place this would be. And the artists could go to Pine Ridge and do creative projects. So one day I just said, you know, the heck with that, let me write this up. So I wrote up a 1-page description. And on Sunday, when I got back from Pine Ridge, my landlords were here in front of my door saying, we want to do the artist in residency program. So they're coming back next week with their contractors to go through all the buildings and decide what has to be done. And May 1st, the first artists are coming.
Oh, beautiful.
To the Thunderheart Foundation Center for the Arts.
Wow. Yeah, so this is a birth. This is a birth of the center where the prophecy was fulfilled of Earth entering the galactic community of inhabited worlds, of peaceful worlds, on July 20th, 2019, during a Lakota Sundance.
And a baby boy, a beautiful baby boy colt was born on Sunday. Sunday's always my most powerful day of the week. You know, it's the day that I feel the most connected, and literally there he was. So it's a tremendous symbol of birth and rebirth and the continuity of life.
Oh, This is so, it's such an intertwining of creation and sacredness and birth and rebirth. And it gives hope for Earth and hope for humanity and life.
Well, it's what we make of it, Alfred. You know, throughout my life, no matter how much of a pain in the butt I am being, you know, I just, from the time I was a little kid writing letters to the editor in grammar school, to the local papers, I've just always made it a policy of speaking my truth. And you know, I've been a letter writer my entire adult life too. And I just encourage everyone, if you get an idea, a creative spark, a thought that you feel has, you know, some breath to it, pursue it. You know, put it out there, because that's what we need to do to change the way things are. When Vonda Highhawk was talking about Wounded Knee, you know, I said to the group, we are all Lakota right now. We are all in the same situation that the Lakota were in, you know, 150 years ago. If we do not take back our rights, where are we? We have so much creativity to share with each other and the world and the universe. And now is the time to do it.
Indeed. Well, we're now coming up to the end of the hour. We have about 3 or 4 minutes to come up to the end of the hour. Are there things that you had wanted to say that you haven't had an opportunity to share yet?
I wanted to just do a little shout out to Tolek.
Okay.
An early interview of yours. He had contacted me after our last conversation together.
Oh.
Because he is very involved with the Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota spiritual traditions. And I, you know, just wanted to acknowledge that because he's been involved in this trajectory for quite some time.
Isn't that wonderful? Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. Oh
yeah. We have so much to learn, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, how can people who are listening to this, how can they stay in touch with your work?
Well, New Observations magazine is the magazine that I publish, and we have 4 issues in the works right now that are coming out between now and February. My email is Mia, M-I-A, .Feroleto, F as in Frank, E-R-O-L-E-T-O @gmail.com. And I, you know, generally respond to all emails within 24 hours. And again, I just encourage you, if you have a dream that you want to pursue, or an opinion, you know, a way to make a contribution, please just put one foot in front of the other and do it. You know, don't think it won't matter, because it does matter. Everything matters, and we really are building a new way of relating to each other and a new way of living together.
This is so awesome. I just have to say that this is beyond words. This is so beyond words. This is touching upon infinity. And so thank you so much for everything that you do, and thank you for having created this conference and the space for this prophecy to have been fulfilled, Mia. It's a planet saver, it's a life saver, it's the savior of the whole human race. Thank you so much.
Thank you for giving me the prophecy, Alfred, because you gave me a very important piece and a really big confirmation about the importance of what just happened. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, until we speak again, and I hope that that's soon.
Thank you so much, Alfred. Talk to you soon.
Okay, then.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.